Hey guys, Garrett back for Sableye the Mind Sculptor. I know it's been kind of a long time. I've had some laryngitis and haven't really been able to record anything. And that was right after I went on a week-long trip, so I ended up missing out on about 2 weeks of content. So I'm sorry about that. I should return to my regular scheduling pretty soon. So it's all in the past. Whatever. We'll get back to normal. So today we're going to be looking at a really cool commander deck. This is actually one that I made in paper. I don't make most of my commander decks that I do on the channel in paper. I've been playing with that mono black Liliana one for a really long time now, over a year at least. So, yeah, it's cool to finally get a new deck in the system. And yeah, here we are. Tana, the Bloodsower, plus Rayhan, Last of the Absent. So Tana is just an extremely efficient creature engine. She just makes creatures so quickly and efficiently. And if she's just allowed to sit on the table, she just pumps out dudes. And I have some Voltron-y stuff in this deck. Most of it is around protecting her and making her get in, because making her big and scary isn't good. It's much better if she can just kind of fly under the radar, make me 3 or 4 guys a turn, and slowly accrue value. So I needed black. That's why I picked Rayhan. And then Rayhan is also super powerful because if you sacrifice Rayhan and put the counters on Tana, Tana can get big fast, especially if you're sacking Rayhan to something like Ashnod's Altar, where you get the mana to play Rayhan again. You can end up giving her like 6+6+ just in a turn by using Ashnods and Rayhan, which can even let Tana get in for significant amounts of commander damage depending on your equipment package. So moving on to the main deck, I'm just going to start with my non-basic lands that I thought deserved to be talked about. I don't want to go over the whole land base though, as it is commander. So we've got Carekeep, makes extra dudes at a pretty good rate. Scrog the Rage Pits. Honestly, there's no reason not to put this in, and I didn't have a Kessig Wolf run on me at the time, so here we go. This deck's built on a budget, so remember that with some of these weird decisions coming up. Westville Abbey, of course, can almost always flip with an active Tana, and even in commander, a big old 9-line lifelinker, haste, indestructible dude. No one's going to call that bad, even in commander, especially on the earlier turns. And then I have a Handweaver Battlements. It never flips. I don't have the Handweaver Garrison to flip it. It's just in here as a haste enabler. So let's move on to my kind of Voltron-y package. We've got Alpha Authority. It gives hexproof, and this creature can't be blocked by more than one creature. And that's good because it really takes advantage of her trample once you have other equipment on her, and hexproof is just nice. So next we have Canopy Cover, which gives hexproof and can't be blocked except by creatures with flying or reach. It doesn't give her flying, she can't block creatures with flying, but it does make her a lot harder to hit. Then we have Champion's Helm, which is just a free equipment. Not a free equipment, but it equips for free. There we go. And it gives her 2+2+ and hexproof, which is pretty nice. The mana is kind of funny on this one. It's a little expensive, but 2+2+ and hexproof is just a really good effect. Grappling Hook is really good, kind of repeatable removal almost. For those of you who don't know, equipment for 4, equips for 4, and gives double strike. And you get to choose a creature when she swings in. This is also really good with Alpha Authority because once you have Alpha Authority and Grappling Hook, you get to choose one blocker, and that's the only thing that can block Tana. So that's a really strong little combination. I like to use it kind of just as repeatable removal too. So Fire Shrieker, equipment for 3, equips for 2, gives the creature double strike. Simple, efficient, good. Hero's Blade. So 3+2+ on a 2-mana equipment that equips for free to a legendary creature is just nice. Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots, both are 2-mana equipments. One equips for 1, the other for 0, and they give hexproof or shroud and haste. So they're just nice little plays to have on the earlier turns that you can then just move over to her and have her start attacking as soon as possible. Madcap Skills gives, as a 2-mana enchantment, gives 3+0+ in Menace. This is pretty good with Alpha Authority. It just makes her completely unblockable. And honestly, if you haven't played with Madcap Skills, it's better than you give it credit for. There are lots of situations where Menace is very, very relevant, and 3+0+ on 2 is just not a bad rate either. So Runes of the Deos, 5 mana enchantment. If the creature is green, it gets 1+1+ in double strike. If it's red, it gets 1+1+ in trample. Tana, of course, both green and red, becomes a 4/4 double striker when you attach this to her. Again, just a fine rate. Trailblazer's Boots, 2 equips for 2, has non-basic land walk. Even in mono decks, there are lots of non-basic lands. This is just basically always unblockable. Whisper Silk Cloak gives Shroud and unblockable, which is just a good combination of effects. And Xenagos, God of Revels, pumps Tana quite a bit, especially if you have other stuff on her. He says at the beginning of combat, target creature you control gets X+X+ in haste until end of turn, where X is the creature's power. And so if you have, for instance, a Madcap skills on her, that'll be 5+5+ in haste. If you have some Rayhan counters on her, that'll be, 5+5+ in haste. So she can get really big with a Xenagos on the table. So now we're going to get into our ramp package, starting first with a thing that isn't really ramp. Yamavawa Elder. When it dies, you get 2 non-basic lands to your hand. You can pay 2 to sacrifice it and draw a card. So, not technically ramp, very strong fixing. Cultivate, of course, 3 mana. Search your library for 2 non-basics. Put 1 into play for 2 basics. Put 1 into play tapped and 1 into your hand. You basically can get 1 untapped if you were already missing your land drop. That's basically ramping you for 1 extra there. And honestly, the fixing is just really nice on cards like this. Kodama's Reach reads exactly the same as Cultivate. Explosive Vegetation gets 2 basics directly into play tapped. Costs 4 mana though. Farseek. In this deck, Farseek is basically a rampant growth. I'm not doing anything broken with Shocklands. So Farseek, if you don't know, goes by type. It lets you search for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain. And in Modern, this is kind of broken because you can get a Shockland, and that kind of makes it unfair. Here, it's basically a rampant growth. Rampant growth, of course, is literally just rampant growth. Signets are all really good. I have all the signets because there's just no reason not to play signets in Commander. Harvest Season is a 3 mana sorcery that when you cast it, you get non-basics equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. So early in the game, this can be 2 lands for 3, which is already a pretty good rate. Late in the game, though, I've had this end up being like 6 lands, 7 lands when I swing out with all my tokens. People will block a few of the tokens, but the ones that are left in play tapped, you end up with a huge land swing. I've definitely blown people out with this card. Primal Growth, pretty much just 2 lands with no drawback in our deck. If you don't know, it's 3 mana, search your library for a land, put it into play. But it has Kicker, sacrifice a creature, which lets you get another one. In our deck, that's pretty much not a drawback. Post Tana, and pre-Tana, you can just get the 1 land and be happy because you're getting up to Tana mana next turn. And then Soul Ring, of course, best ramp in the format, should definitely be banned. Don't know why they've decided to let this card go. Moving on to card draw, we have Ambition's Cost and Ancient Cravings, which both are 4 mana, pay 3 life, draw 3 cards, which is just a pretty good rate. Then we have Painful Truths, 3 mana with Converge, draw and lose life equal to the Converge, so that'll basically be 3 mana, draw 3 cards, lose 3 life, or 2 mana sometimes. Read the Bones, 3 mana, lose 2 life, scry 2, draw 2, which worse number of cards drawn, better card selection. Outpost Siege, when it enters the battlefield, you choose Khans or Dragons, it's 4 mana enchantment. And if you choose Khans, you get to flip the top card of your library into exile every turn, and you may cast it until the end of the turn. If you choose Dragons, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, deal 1 damage to target creature or player. So this is a really cool enchantment because, well, you usually are just going to take the card advantage route because card advantage is card advantage. Sometimes it's really good to be able to ping their dudes in their face with your tokens when they leave the battlefield. If you have, for instance, like a Goblin Bombardment, this will just double it up. So, yeah, Outpost Siege, very strong card. It'll end up being both things. And then Phyrexian Arena, 3 mana enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, lose a life, draw a card. Very simple, straight up card advantage. Life loss doesn't mean anything. This is one of the strongest cards in. So let's look at our sack outlets, or ways to get our creatures off the board. We have Ashnod's Altar, 3 mana, sack a creature, add 2 to your mana pool. Very simple effect. This should be a Phyrexian Altar. I don't have the cash for that though, so if you have a Phyrexian Altar, put it in the deck. Phyrexian Altar, basically the same thing, except instead of 2 colorless mana, you add 1 colored mana. That's a lot stronger in a deck like this where you're not paying very much colorless. Then we've got Attrition. 1 black black, pay a black, sacrifice a creature, destroy target non-black creature. Very good in Commander. Even if they have black creatures, this can end up being just a good sack outlet because you can shoot your own dudes, get 2 dudes for the price of 1. And then, of course, trading tokens for real cards is always good if they don't have black creatures. Evolutionary Leap, 2 green for an enchantment, pay 1 green, flip cards off the top until you reveal a creature, put the creature into your hand, the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Again, getting real creatures for tokens is really good, especially in a deck like this where I don't play very many real creatures at all. So Goblin Bombardment, 2 mana, sack a creature, deal 1 damage to target creature. Very strong little enchantment, just sits out on the board. And the thing with this is that no matter how many tokens you trade for their guy, you're still not spending a card. They're just tokens. I can trade 10 tokens for your Doomgape, and I've traded 0 cards for 1 card. It seems counterintuitive, but it's very strong. Mind Slash, 2 black black for an enchantment that says black, sacrifice a creature, look at target player's hand, and have them discard a non-land card from it. This is just really good. Of course, you can only do this at sorcery speed because that'd be broken otherwise. You could just instant speed on their draw step, make sure they can't get anything. This is just a really good card for getting card advantage. It's also great just as a threat. If someone tutors for something, for instance, on their turn, you can strip it out of their hand. You can say no tutoring, basically, unless you can both get it and play it on the same turn. This is just very strong against a number of decks. If you think someone's going to combo off, you can just Mind Slash them a bunch. Honestly, Mind Slash is probably a card that I should have in my other black decks that have sack sub-themes. It's just a really good card. And then Skull Clamp. This should be banned, definitely. It's a 2 mana equipment that you can equip for 1. Creature gets +1, -1, and when it dies, you draw 2 cards. The thing is, with the -1, it just kills the tokens. You don't need an additional sack. It was originally going to be +1/+1, but they thought that was going to be too overpowered, so they put in the +1, -1 as a downside. Turns out it's the biggest upside the card could have. If you see a unique card, it's either completely awful and they never wanted to do it again because it was so bad, or it's completely amazing and they never wanted to do it again because it was ridiculous. And that's definitely the case with Skull Clamp. So let's move on to my interaction. Blasphemous Act, which is a 1,000,000 mana red board wipe that does 13 damage to everything, but it costs 1 less for each creature. Generally, this just costs 1 red. 1 red and a little bit of mana, 1 red, 2 or 3 mana, and deal 13 to every creature. This is just probably the best red board wipe there is. Crux of Fate, 3 black black, destroy all dragon creatures or all non-dragon creatures. Generally a board wipe. Sometimes you can just blow out the dragon player, though. Hero's Downfall, 1 black black, instant, destroy target creature or planeswalker. Deals with most things. Jund Charm. This really is a charm that does everything. You get to deal 2 damage to each creature, put 2 1/1/1 counters on target creature, or you get to just exile a graveyard straight up. And exiling a graveyard, of course, is just hilarious. At instant speed. So I've used all modes of this because my playgroup has some graveyard shenanigans going on in it, and Jund Charm just shuts it down real quick. Then the 2 damage Wrath, the Pyroclasm effect, at instant speed, I've had to use when a tokens deck is outpacing me one time. And the 2 1/1/1 counters didn't feel good, but it got me 2 more 1/1s for every turn for a couple of turns. So that was just a good card in a lot of situations. Putrefy, 1 green black, destroy target creature or artifact. Very good. Just destroy target creature or artifact, instant speed. Terminate, red black, destroy target creature. And then Void. This is a kind of a weird wrath. 3 red black, name a number. Destroy all creatures with the converted mana cost equal to the number and all artifacts with converted mana cost equal to that number. Target opponent reveals his or her hand, and they have to discard all cards with converted mana cost equal to that number that aren't lands. So you end up just naming the most relevant number, everything gets wiped away, and you sometimes get to blow out someone's hand as well. There are lots of situations definitely where this doesn't do the entire job, but sometimes it just does. And then Decimate. This is just a dumb card. Shouldn't have been printed. Not really meant for Commander. 2 green, red, destroy target artifact, target enchantment, target land, and target creature. The idea was that this card, it doesn't say up to. you have to have all 4 targets to be able to cast it. And so the idea was that it was going to be hard to find an opponent who would have all of those, so you'd usually end up destroying one of your own things. But in Commander, someone is going to have an enchantment, someone's going to have an artifact, always our creature and lands. So usually at the table you'll be able to find 4 targets for it. You'll end up incidentally blowing up someone else's enchantment when you're trying to hose one person. But honestly, as long as there are targets, this is just a really good 4-for-1. So then I'm just going to look at some good cards that I have. They just end up being, like a top end or helpful with something else, but they aren't really able to be fit into any of my other categories. So Golgari Charm, it's pretty much always relevant. It can either destroy an enchantment, give all creatures -1/-1 until end of turn, or regenerate all creatures you control. So I'll often just end up using it as a Wrath protection. I'll hold it up, and even if someone doesn't Wrath, I'll know that I would have been safe if there was a Wrath that came down. It gets me out of a lot of those situations where I'm going to win next turn, but if they Wrath, I just lose. So that's always a good mode. And then the -1/-1 is great if someone else is going bigger than you with tokens or going earlier than you with tokens. And I've even used the Destroy an Enchantment effect against one of my friend's Enchantress decks to drop the shield so that I could swing in. Grave Betrayal is just a really good top-end card in black. Big Old Enchantment lets you get their creatures when they die. If they let this hit, this is just a really strong card. Kazul, Tyrant of Cliffs. So, I don't even know what people are supposed to do against this card if you can somehow protect it. This card is dumb. It's 5 mana, 5/4, and whenever a player attacks you, if they don't pay 3, you get a 3/3. I don't even know what people were supposed to do against that. That card's just silly. I want to make mono red Kazul, Tyrant of Cliffs attack somebody else, the deck. I don't know. It seems silly. Parallel Lives. 3 and a green, and you get 2 tokens whenever you'd get 1. Just doubles up whatever you'd get as far as tokens. But it's not as expensive as Doubling Season. I definitely recommend Doubling Season for this deck if you can afford it. I can't, so yeah. And then Triumph of the Hordes. 2 green. Creatures you control get +1/+1, trample, and infect until end of turn. This will often just win you the game. You can kill 3 people with this, at least 2 a lot of the time, so very strong effect. And then lastly, we're going to move on to my I've called these Aristocrat effects. They're not Aristocrats, but you kind of know what I mean. So Blood Artist, whenever a creature dies, you get to drain for 1. So that's a good effect, especially against Wraths. If someone's going to Wrath you, just say, okay, if you Wrath, I drain you for 14, and then they don't do it. Zulaport Cutthroat, same thing, but it only sees your creatures. It doesn't see opponents' creatures. So Butcher of Malakir basically is Dictate of Erebos or Grave Pact on a stick. Good luck keeping a board up. These cards just end up taking over the game really, really quickly. Catacomb Sifter, it makes a 1/1, and whenever a creature you control dies, you get to scry 1, so that just lets you dig into your deck for whatever you need. Death's Presence says whenever a creature dies, you can give another creature its power in 1/1/1 counters, basically. And this stacks with Rayhan. So, for instance, if Rayhan dies with this up, something gets 6 counters. This just ends up getting out of control with Rayhan. You have, say, a 1/1 with 2 1/1 counters on it. That'll end up giving 2 counters from Rayhan, 3 counters from Death's Presence to whatever it goes to. And then when that thing dies, it'll give 5 counters from Rayhan, 6 counters from Death's Presence to whatever it goes to. So this just gets exponentially bigger with a Rayhan on the board. So the next card I have is Foster. It lets everything you do become an evolutionary leap, basically, for 1 more mana. But the only issue is the cards go to your graveyard. I've gotten very close to milling myself out with this. You have to be very careful, because there are not enough creatures in this deck to foster very many times. Liliana, Heretical Healer. This is just one of my pet cards. I like it a lot. It turns into Liliana, Defiant Necromancer when it flips, and she does a lot of work in this deck. She can get back a lot of the littler creatures and the Aristocrat creatures, and then making opponents discard is always good. And she can even pressure with her ultimate behind just a board of tokens. So I like her. She seems good. And Lumberknot is just an alternate win condition. It says it's a 1/1 for 4 with hexproof, and then whenever a creature dies, you put a 1/1 counter on it. It'll just get big over time and start being a huge beater. And then if you have Rayhan, you can sacrifice the Lumberknot to move all those counters to Tana and get in a big hit with Tana. So that's the deck. I hope you enjoyed. This is definitely one that I would suggest building and trying. It's probably the most fun I've had with the deck in a long time. So until next time, peace out.